Morning to you all. Good to see you. No, I can't see you. It's good to be with you all again. It's the end of the week again, and how quickly do those weeks seem to be going? I wonder if it's my age. Probably is. You remember when you were younger and the school summer holidays felt like a glorious eternity, where you could play from morning to evening without a care. Well, that's how we might view it now, of course, with a touch of nostalgia and a bit of poetic license. But there is some truth in there. I used to hate it when you'd see in the shops the school clothing in the windows and back to school in big letters, and they'd put that would start just as the school holidays would start. I try to avoid those as much as possible. And I've been thinking about the children this week, and how I feel to a certain extent they seem to have been forgotten during this pandemic. Um, and I'm not saying that about the parents who have had to educate and entertain their children every day, at the same time as balancing a whole range of other pressures. I actually feel we've forgotten what an important and difficult role parents and carers have had during this time, because it isn't easy. It hasn't been easy. No, what I'm talking about, people that we've forgotten uh, about the children, is I'm just talking about generally as a society. I think we have. Um, and how important are our children? Well, of course, they're the future of the world, aren't they? What they become will be what the world will become. And it's important that we nurture and teach them. Um, and that we become good examples of what it means to be a compassionate and loving human being. And children need to have a voice, and we need to be able to listen to that voice and to give them respect for their viewpoint and their feelings. In my career, I've seen too many damaged and abused children who have not been afforded the dignity of being listened to or regarded as a precious human being that they so clearly are. And I often think about my own childhood and school days, as you probably gather. And I'm not saying this for sort of look, poor me. I'm just sort of telling a story to illustrate something. I hated school from the moment I started. It was a real shock to the system. There was no preparation for it. My birthday being in October meant that I started school at the beginning of the year and entered an already established class. I can picture it now as if it were yesterday. I remember it being a cold, frosty January morning, and my mum getting me dressed in my new uniform. Plenty of Brill cream. If I'd have fallen down, my hair would have cracked. And for the finishing touch, that was, and off we went with my new gabardine mac and school cap on. My mum took me into the classroom, and the teacher showed me where to sit. And I sat down sheepishly, looking to my mum for any cues, and then she said to me, "I'll see you at dinner time, son," meaning lunch, but I wasn't middle class then. She walked out of the classroom door, and I could feel my face go red and hot, but I didn't cry. I wanted to. And the first lesson entailed the teacher asking us to get out our chalkboards, and she asked us to write down some figures on it. Easy peasy, I thought. And I started to draw big fat women. Because my mother and grandmother were always talking about their figures and their need to lose weight. So I knew that was what the teacher meant by figures. And I was doing well, drawing these big fat women. And I looked over at the child next to me, and he was writing down numbers, 4 and 10. And I nudged him and I said, "Hey," she said, "figures." And I pointed to my chalkboard with these big fat women on. And he carried on. And then I looked the other side of me, and he was doing numbers as well, 3 and 2 and whatever. And I said to him the same. I said, hey, she said figures, and pointed again to my chalkboard. And then suddenly a voice appeared from the back of me. Terence Braithwaite, what are you doing? Figures, miss, I said confidently. But then she took the chalkboard off me and hastily wiped off my fat women masterpiece. You see, I'd never heard numbers called figures. If she had said numbers, I would have understood. They call it restricted code, don't they? And anyway, my mum came to collect me at dinner time, went home, had some dinner, not lunch, dinner, and started to relax, and I played with my toys. And then Mum said, come on, son, it's time to go. What? Because I thought the morning was it. I thought that would be the end of school. Anyway, the next day I wet myself in class because I was frightened to ask to go to the toilet, and no one had told me anyway where the toilets were. There was a big puddle around my chair, and I tried to keep pushing it over to my neighbour's chair with my feet, hoping that I could push the blame somewhere else. And then a voice and phrase that would become all too familiar. Terence Braithwaite, what have you done? And that was the start of my school career, and it had a profoundly negative effect on me. So much so that I became a school refugian. Now that wasn't the only reason. The other reason that I understand as an adult is that my mum was often very poorly, and I think it was my anxiety about leaving her that also combined with that. But no one would understand that. No one took any time to try and understand that. And in my primary school years, my attendance was probably about 50% or less. And I had terrible fights with Mum. She'd be pushing me out of the door, and I'd be screaming and kicking and all sorts, just horrible. And I just, these years later, I feel so sad that I put my mum through all that, because it wouldn't have helped her in any way, shape or form. Anyway, I somehow managed to pass my 11 plus and went to a grammar school where the misery and the lack of attendance continued. The only saving grace that I had, I think, was that I had a sense of humour, and so a lot of the time I played the fool. And I was told by many teachers that I wouldn't amount to anything, that I'd end up in a dead end, a cul-de-sac. But one teacher saw something in me that others didn't, and he became a real encourager to me. He taught English language and literature, and he made me believe that I could write creatively. And he gave me a love of Shakespeare and Chaucer, and that led on to a love of poetry in many forms, and literature. And I excelled in his class because I wanted to please him. And I usually used to come top in English literature and English language each term, which wasn't the case for other subjects. My Latin teacher once wrote on my report, a rare visitor, which was true. Anyway, years later, this teacher took a night class that Mavorian was taking, and he asked if she was related to me, because Braithwaite isn't a name that is particularly evident around these parts. And he told her that he felt strongly that I'd had a raw deal from the teachers at the school because no one had bothered to get to know me or listen to me or find out what my interests were. Now that meant the world to me to hear that. And I felt vindicated and further encouraged. God bless that teacher who's long gone now. And when you think about Jesus and how important he felt children were, he felt it was important to give them the highest regard. He always had time for them. He called the children to him and said, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them. For the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. And he said, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you all who is the greatest." Let's not forget those words from the Master. Let's always value the children. Let's welcome them. Let's listen to them. And let's learn from them. They have a lot to teach us. Well, I'm on holiday next week, and I'll try and do a thought for the day from that great place, Northumberland. So I might be by the sea when I record my next one. I don't know yet. So take care of yourself. If you're going to church on Sunday and on the car park, enjoy that. If you're not, you'll still enjoy the service online as usual. No one's forgotten. Everybody will find something that's comfortable for them. Take care, and God bless you. Bye.